So the 10th of September 2024, the guided contemplation this morning is called Facing and Embracing Our Finitude. So please relax into your posture. Take a nice couple of deep breaths. You may keep your eyes open or closed. Listening to the sounds in your environment. Feeling the breath, breathing. Remembering our intention, the last line of the practice principles, being just this moment, compassion's way. I'd like to start with a quote from a book by Carlos Castaneda, Journey to Ixtlan, The Lessons of Don Juan. For me, the world is weird because it is stupendous, awesome, mysterious, unfathomable. My interest has been to convince you that you must assume responsibility for being here, in this marvelous world, in this marvelous desert, in this marvelous time. I want to convince you that you must learn to make every act count, since you are going to be here for only a short while, in fact, too short for witnessing all the marvels of it. So this morning I will present what I prefer to call a guided contemplation, or teisho, rather than a guided meditation. Therefore, I will not be directing your attention other than recommending you sit still in silent, open awareness, as if you were practicing silent meditation. There is no need to focus all your attention on my words. Rather, just let the sound and meaning of my words pass through your awareness, along with the sensations and the sounds in your own environment. I will at times pause and leave spaces for silence. For in listening to the silence, you may hear the voice of your conscience calling you, disclosing to you what really matters to you in your heart. This morning, which is a Tuesday morning, we will be contemplating our finitude and how, by facing and embracing our finitude, we can learn to live a life full of appreciation and meaning. I'm going to start by reading you a poem by the 20th century Irish writer W.B. Yeats. It is called The Wild Swans at Cool. The trees are in their autumn beauty. The woodland paths are dry. Under the October twilight, the water mirrors a still sky. Upon the brimming water, among the stones, are 59 swans. The 19th autumn has come upon me since I first made my count. I saw, before I had well finished, all suddenly mount and scatter, wheeling in great broken rings upon the clamorous wings. I have looked upon those brilliant creatures, and now my heart is sore. All's changed since I, hearing at twilight the first time on this shore, the bell beat of the wings above my head, trod with a lighter tread. Unwearied still, lover by lover, they paddle in the cold, companionable streams or climb the air. Their hearts have not grown old. Passion or conquest wander where they will, attend upon them still. But now they drift on the still water, mysterious and beautiful. Among what rushes will they build? By what lake's edge or pool delight men's eyes when I awake some day to find they have flown away? This poem was published in 1919, just after the end of the First World War. Yeats was born in Dublin in 1865, making him 54 years old at the time. I first bought this book at the old Chaucer bookshop in Stratford-upon-Avon in November 1975, when I was 19 years old. I had just finished my HSC and had travelled to England for a holiday before starting university in 1976. When I read this poem, I identified with the speaker of the poem, but I don't look back with regret when I remember my naive 19-year-old self venturing out into the world all those years ago. I look back and recognize the seeds of my current self in my 19-year-old self and rejoice at our connection and sense of continuity. But more on this later. Let's return to the poem. The poem explores the lived experience of time and aging. It is structured around comparing two moments. The first moment is a memory of the first time he visited the park 19 years earlier, when he was 35 years old. The second moment is the present moment in the poem, where the speaker is now 54 years old and situated in the autumn years of his life. The seasons are a popular metaphor for our natural life cycle. If we remain optimistic about our longevity, we could allocate 25 years for each quarter. Hence, from birth to 25 is the spring of our life. 25 to 50 is the summer of our life. 50 to 75 is the autumn of our life. And 75 to 100 is the winter of our life, if we live that long. Of course, from a Zen perspective, every day is a good day, and every season is a good season. But we human beings don't always see it that way. The poem begins by describing the beauty of the natural world. The trees are dressed in their autumn beauty. At twilight, the brimming water on the lake mirrors a still sky. You can feel the tranquility. The inhabitants of the lake are 59 swans. They are beautiful, passionate, energetic creatures. They seem just as alive now as they were when Yeats first saw them. They don't seem to age or have any awareness of the passage of time. The swans are still just as full of life as they were back then. In their loving pairs, they paddle through the cold, friendly water or soar into the sky. Their hearts remain young. Their lives are still filled with passionate desires, with the freedom to go wherever they want to. How the poet looks upon these brilliant creatures and his heart feels sore, it feels hurt. What's important is the way that the speaker senses these changes to be irreversible. Time can only travel, it seems, in one direction, and the good times, like the speaker's first visit to Cool, are only memories. In other words, there's no going back. That's why the swans seem to evoke such bittersweet feelings for the speaker. There is something timeless, magisterial even, about their way of being. They also seem free to wander where they will and remain mysterious, beautiful. They remind the speaker of what he has lost to time. The wild swans at Cool, then, shows an individual struggling to come to terms with the path that life has taken for him. Ultimately, this speaks to the way that life runs an irreversible course. People can't go back or change the way that things have turned out. The speaker holds on to happier memories, but these are tinged by the sadness that they are fated never to become real experiences again. This is one of the characteristics of finitude. We can't go back and change the past. All we can do is make our choices in the present moment. But through those choices, we become ourselves. And our future self, right up until the very end, is indeterminate. That's why existential anxiety is at the core of our being. We can flee from choosing who we are going to be, or we can face and embrace our freedom and our finitude. Another important theme in the poem is the contrast between the natural world and human being. Nature in the poem is presented as something that is unchanging in its beauty and majesty. This creates a sense of division between the world of nature and that of human beings, which, as represented by the speaker, is acutely aware of the passage of time and plagued by a sense of loss. The swans remind the speaker that he himself has grown older and now feels a sense of weariness and disconnection from his younger, lighter treading 35-year-old self. Nature also seems untroubled by, perhaps even entirely indifferent to, human foibles. the swans continuing to appear full of passion and vigor, even as the speaker is weighed down by the hopes, dreams, and disappointments that people experience in life. This doubles down on the poem's gentle sense of isolation and sadness about aging, heartbreak, and perhaps even wider contextual issues like the First World War. These issues, the poem subtly suggests, remain small or insignificant in the face of nature's everlasting grandeur or sublimity. The speaker in the poem falls into a bittersweet mood, or simply a mood of regret. He has lost himself in his self-reflection on his memory of 19 years ago. Indeed, the speaker wonders in the poem's closing lines if the swans might someday have flown away. It's perfectly possible, of course, that in accordance with their nature, the swans might do this. This heightens the sense of distance between the speaker and the swans, thereby also intensifying this sense of fundamental difference between humanity and nature itself. Furthermore, this makes the speaker's life seem small and insignificant. That is, the unchanging and majestic nature of the swans is a kind of stand-in for the way in which his own life has had little effect on the world. And while he might have wanted his life to make a difference in the past, now he feels too weary to believe that to be possible anymore. Maybe. So we can see how the speaker has found himself lost in a mood of regret, a form of suffering. I am sure we can all relate to how easy it is to fall into this kind of nostalgic longing for our younger self. But is this inevitable? Are we doomed, as Scott Fitzgerald says in the last line of his novel, The Great Gatsby, to beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past? As Fitzgerald implies, are we going to continue to suffer by resisting the flow of time? By seeking to hold on to a more youthful self and memories of wine and roses? The tragedy in the poem is that the speaker appreciates intensely the beauty of autumn in the natural world, but he separates himself out of this natural world and fails to appreciate his own autumnal beauty. Here's an alternative story for you. This time it's about wild ducks. It's case 53, Pai Shang's Wild Ducks from the Blue Cliff Record collection of 100 koans. Once, when Great Master Ma and Pai Shang were walking together, they saw some wild ducks fly by. The Great Master asked, "What is that?" And Shang said, "Wild ducks." And the Great Master said, "Where have they gone?" Shang said, "They've flown away." The Great Master then twisted Pai Chang's nose. Shang cried out in pain. And the Great Master said, "When have they ever flown away?" In the Zen story, the master skillfully wakes Shang out of the duality that the speaker of the Wild Swans poem was getting lost in. by a sharp twist of the nose. Wake up! We can say that the practice of staying awake to this moment, to the wonder of this moment, to the inseparability of self and world, without imposing our narratives of gain and loss, is the practice of the Zen way. This dream of duality that we are constantly getting caught up in is the dream that the wild ducks or the wild swans are separate from us, that there are things in the world that fly away. This is our natural attitude, our common sense understanding of how the world really is. It is an understanding that we inherit, that we are born into. The sharp twist of the nose awakens us to the insight that we are never apart from the one seamless reality that we all share. I am not a subject perceiving an external object. Self and world co-arise. This reality can never get pinned down because it is always changing. This reminds us that we participate in nature in the same way as wild ducks and swans. We are also just as perfect and just as beautiful as the wild ducks and swans. Embrace the wild core of your being. When the master pulls our nose, in one sense we could say that although everything in life eventually flies away, as long as I am alive, I can always count on this moment being just this moment. It might be sad or joyful, painful or pleasurable, but what we might call this openness that we are is a flow of experiencing, and this flow of experiencing does not fly away. Until, of course, it comes to its final end in what we call death. But death is not something we experience. We can only experience being towards death. Which brings me to my final theme for today, finitude. Even though we can experience insights into the oneness of life, we also experience this unique human consciousness of the flow of time. And with this comes the realization that we are finite beings. We can either live our lives in a constant denial of this fact, and hence live our lives concealing finitude from our consciousness, or we can turn around and face and embrace our finitude. Magid gave a Dharma talk on finitude on the 21st of January 2023, which is available on his Zendo webpage. He tells us that birthdays and anniversaries remind us of our mortality. How many more of these will I have? How many will we have together? But, he says, in addition to mortality, I think they are also reminders of finitude, which is an aspect of impermanence that I don't think we talk enough about. And it has its own distinct nature and issues. We might say that in general, impermanence is all about things changing and ending and passing away. But finitude refers instead to a limit on possibilities, things that will never happen. I would also add, in the opposite direction, the experience of finitude reminds us that we can't go back. However, although we can't literally go back and change the past, we can revise our narrative of the past. Finitude does not always have to be associated with sadness and regret. It can remind us of what really matters, what we really care about. When I look back at my naive 19-year-old self, I feel joy and a profound sense of connection. I have lived a life, more or less, in allegiance to what mattered to him and what he cared about. There have been times, I will confess, that I did get distracted, but I always found my way back to following my heart in this way. Finitude reminds us to seize the day, to take a stand, to be our own person, to choose our own commitments, and not to be distracted by feelings or thoughts of turning away from facing and embracing our finitude. Finitude reminds us that one choice excludes another choice. Knowing that I chose this path means I can't choose that path. And we need to own our path. It is the path we have chosen. Or did the path choose us? Our future selves are always indeterminate. We are always on our way to becoming someone. For example, what comes up for you when we contemplate the question, who am I? How do you answer that question? Do you look within to discover your true self that has been hidden from you all this time? On the one hand, from the perspective of oneness or sameness, we can say we are all one with life, and that's true. But on the other hand, from the perspective of difference, we are a unique being, a unique person, living in a unique situation, in a time and place that will never be again. Our uniqueness extends to our physical form, but more importantly, it extends to who we are. And who we are is really the sum total of the unique choices we have made. But for most of us, most of the time, finitude can feel like a matter of regret. Like the speaker in the poem, we think about what is missing, or what we have lost, or what is no longer possible, or the things I will never be able to do now that I am 67 years old. And as Barry says, we're called upon to come to terms with the fact that for better or worse, I'm living this life instead of some other life. And we have to make our peace with that in some sense, regardless of the content of our life. Because whatever the content of our life, it will always contain this, but lack that. As Barry says, life imposes limits on us, imposes lack, imposes disability or illness, or poverty or loneliness. And the challenge for us is to practice with that and to figure out what practicing with that means. This, I think, is the practice of finitude. And I think it happens at every stage of our life. Not just when you get to my age and start thinking about how many years you have left. I think it's a factor in what often gets called a midlife crisis, a certain point where all of a sudden it hits you. Is this all there is? Is this going to be my career for the rest of my life? Am I always going to be living here with this person? And people sometimes get frantic and feel trapped in the life that they have, even if it's a good life. There's a kind of sudden realization and terror around, well, this is all there is? What if I never get to... And you fill in the blank. Go here, have sex with somebody else, get to drive a red sports car, whatever it is you think is this extra thing you need in your life to feel like you're not missing out. I think that there are all different stages in our life where that fear of missing out suddenly sort of just stares us right in the face. And that's coming to terms with finitude. Finitude is a dimension of impermanence that I think confronts us all the time. Not just in the way we face the prospect of someday dying, but how we face living here and now in this life and not some other. We are unique creatures. Our existence presents us with two fundamental questions. Who am I? And what am I to do with my life? And we answer those questions not by looking within, but by living our life.